Everything began on what seemed like an ordinary day for astronomers, July 1st, 2025. In northern Chile, at the high-altitude Atlas Observatory, one of the automated telescopes received a series of signals that did not match any known catalog of celestial objects. At first, the operators assumed it might be a glitch, a pixel error, a satellite streak, or leftover space debris. But the data repeated. The same coordinates, the same speed, but the wrong direction. The telescope detected an object moving at more than 61 kilometers per second. Far too fast to be a typical comet. And most intriguing of all, the trajectory did not correspond to any orbit within the solar system. It was hyperbolic, meaning the body had arrived from outside and would never return again. In the Atlas system logs, this object was initially recorded as C2025N1, without any hint of sensationalism. But within a few hours, astronomers realized they were looking at something much more significant. Something that did not come from our world. In the first hours after the discovery, the observatory's internal network recorded a few short message exchanges between the center in Honolulu and the Chilean branch. One of the lines, which later disappeared from the archive, contained only the phrase, "The trajectory doesn't resemble anything we've seen before." A few hours later, access to the Atlas logs was restricted. Officially, to verify the accuracy of the data. Unofficially, several employees told journalists they saw servers being shut down remotely, and some files simply vanish. When NASA confirmed the observation, the object received a new designation, 3I Atlas. 3I, the third interstellar object after 1I Oumuamua, 2017, and 2I Borisov, 2019. The press immediately began comparing it to the previous interstellar visitors, but Atlas specialists noted, this time something was off. The trajectory showed subtle, almost invisible deviations that couldn't be explained by planetary gravity. These oscillations were too small to call them a maneuver, yet strange enough to raise questions. Some researchers suggested it was just the effect of solar radiation pressure. Others, that the observations were inaccurate. But eventually it became clear, even after accounting for all sources of error, a small but stable shift in the motion vector remained. There is speculation that this is when representatives of U.S. military space agencies joined the case. No official document confirms this, but in the same days the NORAD satellite tracking system temporarily halted publication of some orbital bulletins, supposedly for technical updates. Whether this is a coincidence remains unknown. Several independent analysts who monitor open telescope data noticed that in early images, 3I Atlas appeared unusually clean, with no characteristic coma, no dust scattering, as if the object wasn't evaporating like a typical comet, but instead had a solid, possibly metallic surface. A few days after these observations were published, the images in the database were replaced with new ones, with lighting artifacts corrected. Why exactly these files were updated first, no observatory explained. Some suggest that the original series of images may have contained something the public was not meant to see, something that didn't fit the natural model of a comet. Interestingly, at the same time, several satellites detected anomalous electromagnetic field fluctuations in the southern latitudes where the object passed. Officially, these may have been magnetometer errors, but the readings repeated across two different missions. Some researchers think it was the result of the object moving through thin plasma flows. Others, that the source was inside the object itself. Astronomers who publicly commented on the discovery spoke cautiously, but in private circles, questions began to spread. If this isn't a comet, then what is it? And why is someone in a hurry to restrict access to raw data? According to certain indirect reports, in the first days after 3I Atlas was detected, NASA received a recommendation from the Pentagon to temporarily postpone the publication of a full coordinate set. The explanation was simple: the need to verify system errors. But behind the scenes, it was interpreted differently. No one wanted a repeat of the scandal after Oumuamua, when several physicists hinted that its shape and motion were too precise. Now, it's difficult to separate facts from speculation. But one thing is certain: the discovery of 3I Atlas became a turning point. It was not just a cosmic fragment. It was a signal: we are not alone in space, at least not in the way we used to think. Why were some observations never published? Why do some Atlas archives still have empty days in their logs? And who was the first to suggest that 3I Atlas might not be a natural object, but the remnant of something artificial? No official source comments on this. And perhaps that is why this story is only beginning. When 3I Atlas first appeared in the telescope's field of view, astronomers recorded strange behavior, a trajectory that matched none of the known models of natural bodies. Its velocity was so high that it became clear this object was not bound to the sun's gravitational field. In the scientific community, this meant only one thing: it had arrived from beyond our solar system. The facts showed that the object's speed exceeded 26 kilometers per second, and its angle of approach did not correspond to any known orbit of comets or asteroids. But what attracted the most attention was its rotation. Recorded data indicated irregular changes in brightness, as if its surface had metallic reflections, something unusual for typical rocky bodies. Some researchers even suggested that the surface might have been partially polished, possibly due to a collision or, as some enthusiasts believe, due to artificial intervention. Interestingly, around the same time the object was passing through the outer part of the solar system, several radio observatories in the southern hemisphere detected brief pulses of unknown origin. Their duration was only a few seconds, and the frequency matched the range often used for interplanetary communication. Officially, this was explained as natural radio noise caused by solar activity. But later it turned out that there were no solar flares during those days. There is a theory that these signals might have been connected to 3I Atlas. According to certain indirect reports, one European observatory even pointed its antenna directly at the object. But the results of the observations were never released. When one of the technicians involved in the monitoring gave an anonymous interview, he mentioned, "We received something, but we were ordered to stop transmitting data." Literally a few minutes later, the communication channel was shut down. Why data from certain radars disappeared remains unknown. Access to part of the archives was blocked literally an hour after the information appeared in the public database. Rumors began to spread online that someone was trying to hide not the object itself, but specific information about it. Several independent astronomers claim that after this, visual observations of the object became significantly more difficult, as if its brightness had changed. This could have been related to its rotation or to a release of material, but there is another version. Some researchers believe that 3I Atlas may have performed a maneuver. The term does not appear in technical reports, but if one follows the changes in its speed, one can notice a short-term slowdown, something similar to braking. Officially, such behavior is explained by gas outgassing from the surface, as occurs with comets. But the problem is that no signs of a tail or evaporation were detected. Instead, telescopes recorded a faint but steady infrared glow. And this is where things became truly interesting. According to several observations, this glow persisted even when the object moved farther away from the sun, meaning it could not have been caused by heating. Immediately, theories appeared online. Perhaps the glow was artificial. Some suggested residual heat from internal reactions, others, a power source that was still functioning. In satellite images from that period, a dark zone appeared, a strip covering several degrees of the sky where images were, for unknown reasons, replaced with new ones of lower resolution. No official source commented on this, though technically it looked unusual. Such replacements happen only when archives are manually overwritten. At the same time, several independent researchers claim to have obtained unofficial copies of spectral data showing short peak shifts, ones that correspond to no known natural material. One of them compared the spectrum to samples of aerospace alloys and found a striking similarity. Some scholars believe this might be a coincidence or a technical error. But the fact remains, the behavior of 3I Atlas and its physical characteristics do not fit the usual pattern of interstellar objects. Interestingly, a few days after these rumors appeared, the official page of one observatory temporarily vanished from the internet. When restored, all entries related to the period of observing the object had been removed. According to some indirect accounts, a phrase circulated among astronomers at the time, "We saw something we weren't supposed to see." What exactly they meant, no one explains. The question remains, was 3I Atlas merely a natural fragment that passed through our system, or could it have had another purpose? Some believe it might have been a fragment of something much larger, a craft or probe that had long lost contact with its origin. There are many theories, and none have been disproven yet. Perhaps the answer lies somewhere between the lines, in those few seconds of radio signal that were never decoded. Whether this is a coincidence, that is for you to decide. After Object 3I Atlas was first detected, the scientific community exploded with interest. But that interest faded just as quickly as it appeared. Only a few weeks after the first data were published, most observatories stopped updating their reports. The official explanation: end of the observational window. But some researchers claim the truth was different. There is a theory that an internal information malfunction occurred in the databases of several major astronomical data centers. Files containing detailed telemetry of the object suddenly appeared corrupted. And although an explanation was provided quickly, allegedly an archiving error, technical specialists who worked with these systems mentioned something else in off-record conversations. Only the data covering the period when the object made its closest pass to Earth had disappeared. According to certain indirect reports, a series of short but distinct radio pulses were recorded at that time. They repeated every 47 seconds and gradually weakened. An independent Canadian group of enthusiasts attempted to reconstruct these signals from old copies on open NASA servers. But within a few days, access to the archives was blocked for maintenance. Curiously, when the archives came back online, the file containing these recordings was gone. Rumors spread online that the signal might not have been accidental. One radio astronomer who wished to remain anonymous said, "The pulse pattern doesn't look natural. It's more like a sequence of data packets. But we can't confirm that because officially that data no longer exists." On astronomy forums, screenshots of spectrograms appeared, only to be quickly removed by moderators. Those who managed to save them noticed a strange pattern. The signal apparently contained a repeating frequency matching a band often used in NASA's intersatellite communication channels. Coincidence or not, no one dared to conclude. But the impression remained. Someone or something was transmitting information. During this period, several countries began removing publicly accessible telemetry pages about 3I Atlas. The French Ceres Observatory, for example, deleted an entire section of its website and stated officially that some data require verification before republication. But the republication never happened. Some researchers believe this was no coincidence. There is speculation that certain information was removed after intervention by private institutes holding government contracts. One astronomer who worked in a data processing system recalled, "We received a letter demanding a temporary halt to any publications about the object until an internal review was completed. But there was no official document, just a letter without signatures." Why the silence began at exactly that moment remains unanswered. All news sites that actively covered 3I Atlas almost simultaneously stopped posting updates. Several bloggers using amateur telescopes claimed that after mentioning signal anomalies, they received warnings from hosting platforms about policy violations related to publishing sensitive data. Around this time, scientific circles started discussing the possibility that 3I Atlas might have been part of a larger process, perhaps a fragment of an object moving toward Earth much earlier. Some believe the orbit it followed was not random. If one extends its trajectory, it passes through a region of space where unknown infrared flashes were recorded a few years prior. A few researchers even suggested it could have been following a route rather than passing by chance. In such a case, 3I Atlas might have served as a marker or beacon, a remnant of something larger. Of course, official science rejected this idea, but no one managed to disprove it either. On amateur forums, people reported attempts to track the object again. However, coordinates from official centers did not match each other. According to some data, 3I Atlas had already left the solar system. According to others, its motion slowed, as if it were hovering near the edge of Jupiter's gravitational field. Is that physically possible? Unlikely. But the fact remains, after a certain point, the object's coordinates were no longer confirmed by any telescope. No confirmation, no denial, just silence. At the same time, rumors spread among astronomers that the topic of 3I Atlas was unofficially banned at certain conferences. One speaker who attempted to mention possible anomalies received a recommendation to refrain from further publications. He was told this was to avoid speculation, and yet the speculation only intensified. Some enthusiasts suggested that the object might still be within the solar system, but moving at an angle that made it nearly invisible to typical telescopes. Others went even further. If it was an artificial structure, perhaps it could alter its reflection or even mask its presence. Strangely, a few months later, one space mission report mentioned a short item, anomaly in background noise. Technical note, detected repeating pattern at 1,420 MHz. This is the same frequency on which a theoretical extraterrestrial signal would most likely appear, as it corresponds to the universal hydrogen line. Officially, nothing unusual. But there were too many coincidences. Why did dozens of sources suddenly fall silent after this? Why did independent observations stop exactly when the signal disappeared? And most importantly, if 3I Atlas did leave our solar system, why has no one published its final exit coordinates? No official source comments on this. Things might turn out to be simpler, or, on the contrary, far more complex. When people officially stopped talking about 3I Atlas, the topic slowly slipped into the shadows. But in the shadows, it did not disappear. On the contrary, that was where it began its second life. That was when the first attempts appeared to restore what someone had tried to erase. One of the first was an unknown user under the nickname EchoNull, who posted fragments of telemetry logs on the dark web, allegedly from the Mauna Kea Observatory database. The data looked genuine: timestamps, station codes, spectral rows. And most importantly, among those records was something resembling anomalous pulses, short repeating signals, at frequencies matching those mentioned in early reports about 3I Atlas. Fact: such logs had never been publicly available. But only a few hours after they appeared, all links to the archives vanished, and the user's account was blocked. Rumors spread that this was not the work of moderators, but of a security response team monitoring data leaks in real time. A few days later, another group, Astroleaks, known for recovering old Voyager mission data, announced that they had managed to decode part of the binary files removed from NASA servers. According to them, among the recovered data were packets labeled A3I Delta 42, matching the period when 3I Atlas passed through the inner solar system. One of these packets contained infrared radiation measurements that did not match any standard profile. They described a constant heat source with fluctuations of 2 to 3 Kelvin, independent of distance from the Sun. For a cosmic object, this is anomalous. Some researchers believe such data could indicate an internal energy source. Official science might explain it simply as residual heat after an impact, but why it did not dissipate over time remains unanswered. According to indirect reports, members of the Astroleaks team received a recommendation not to publish the full data. Their site suffered several DDoS attacks, and the forums where they discussed their findings were temporarily blocked in several countries. Meanwhile, on Reddit, messages appeared from a user claiming to be a former employee of an astronomical center in Arizona. He claimed he had seen an internal report discussing possible artificial symmetry of the object. According to him, the report included infrared images showing a clear hexagonal shape, almost geometrically perfect. None of these images survived in public archives. But, as researchers noted, coincidentally, during the same time window, several observatories reported technical failures in their image storage systems. There is a belief that a targeted data purge took place. Several independent digital forensics specialists noticed that metadata in public archives contained holes, gaps of several hours where records were simply missing. Such gaps appear more like manual editing than accidental faults. Another detail: during that same period, according to logs from the Open Space Track System, several classified satellites were directed toward the same region of the sky, officially for debris monitoring. But a month later, all records of that mission also vanished from the database. According to certain indirect sources, one of these satellites may have taken close-up photographs of the object. It is unknown what was captured, but shortly afterward an official communication channel displayed the marker observation terminated. Several employees of the Cerro Parenal Observatory in Chile anonymously stated that during that week they were forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding unusual atmospheric data, allegedly unrelated to any cosmic object. But whether that was true remains unknown. Around the same time, an unusual electromagnetic field was detected over South America. Radio amateurs reported short glitches in signal reception, similar to interference produced by passing military satellites. Officially, this was attributed to ionospheric disturbances, but geographically the zone matched exactly the region where 3I Atlas was expected to pass according to earlier calculations. Some enthusiasts speculated this could have been the moment of activation of some mechanism or reaction. Even a week later, micromagnetic deviations, too weak for official reports but captured by private detectors, were recorded in the atmosphere. As one independent researcher put it, "We can't prove it was related to 3I Atlas, but there are too many coincidences." Sometimes what they call noise is simply something they don't want to explain. After this, all attempts to publicly discuss the topic at scientific conferences disappeared. A Princeton University professor who planned a talk titled, "Could an Interstellar Object Be Artificial?" received an email requesting him to postpone the presentation due to the absence of a technical reviewer. But the email was not signed by the conference committee. It came from an unknown entity using a government domain address. Soon after, the accounts of individuals involved in the topic began to disappear. The Econol dark web channel stopped updating. The AstroLeaks archive vanished, and in official NASA publications the term 3I Atlas was no longer used. It was replaced by the technical designation C2023A3, and even the discovery pages became shorter. Rumors now circulate that 3I/Atlas may not have been just an interstellar object, but possibly a fragment of technological origin, left behind or lost by someone traveling between stars. And although all official sources deny any possibility of artificiality, one question remains open. Why were the data that could disprove it destroyed or concealed? Whether this is coincidence or someone deliberately erasing a story, that is for you to decide. But even in deleted lines, traces remain. And those who search for them say that 3I Atlas hasn't said its last word yet. When the object 3I Atlas had already passed the closest point of its trajectory to the Sun, observations began to decrease. It was moving away, and its brightness was fading. But it was during this period that events started occurring which are difficult to explain even scientifically. A real fact. Several ground-based radio observatories attempted to capture reflected signals from the object using high-power antennas. At first, the signals were coming in, weak but stable. Then, within just a few hours, everything went silent. No station could detect anything, not even background noise. Interpretation. Technically, this can be explained. The object is moving away, the signal weakens, the equipment has sensitivity limits. But some researchers noticed something else. During the same hours when the signals disappeared, several astronomical databases became temporarily inaccessible. Certain observation lines vanished from the Minor Planet Center archives, and the website of one telescope displayed a temporary message about a data synchronization error. Some consider this a coincidence. But a different idea spread online. Perhaps someone deliberately restricted access to prevent certain data from being widely seen. There were even suggestions that 3I Atlas might have emitted short, almost imperceptible pulses in the radio band. On one radio astronomy forum, a user named Skytrace_203 claimed to have detected an anomalous peak at 1.42 gigahertz, the well-known hydrogen line, often considered by astronomers as a universal communication channel. There is no official confirmation. But interestingly, a few days after that post, the user's account was deleted and the discussion archives were wiped. Who did it and why remains unknown. At the same time, several amateur radio telescopes in different countries recorded white noise, repeating at 13-minute intervals. At first it was attributed to technical issues, but the synchrony between regions looked suspicious. During that period, NASA Earth Observatory satellite images taken near the object's orbital path showed a darkened area, a square patch where data had been replaced with a uniform gray field. Such voids happen, but the timing was too precise. The exact day 3I Atlas crossed the visible sector. Some argue it was simply a replacement of corrupted data. But several researchers point out that when the images were restored, the region looked different. A few independent enthusiasts even claim that the older archives show a dark spot with sharp edges, as if the object had a symmetrical structure. Another fact raising questions. According to an anonymous employee at a Hawaiian observatory, after the night the signals disappeared, they were ordered to halt all unauthorized observations and transfer the data to a central repository. Normally, this only happens in potential security risk situations, for example, when an object threatens satellite collisions. But 3I Atlas was already moving away. Some commentators suggest that the central repository is not just an internal NASA server, but a specialized restricted access database. And although there is no proof, part of the object's observational data indeed vanished from public access afterward. Another oddity. At the time the signals went silent, high-frequency activity increased over North America. NOAA reported anomalous solar radiation, but there were no solar flares at the time. According to certain indirect reports, some stations may have mistaken this radiation for an artificial source. Several facilities noted short bursts in a narrow frequency band, characteristic of transmitting antennas rather than natural cosmic objects. All of this looks like a chain of coincidences, but ones that line up too neatly. And the more independent observers collect, the harder it becomes to believe it's all just technical errors. Some suggest the object might have shut down, as if entering a passive mode, no longer reflecting even the weakest light. Such behavior is hard to imagine for a natural body, but possible if the surface has electromagnetic absorbing properties. And here comes the most intriguing part. Several astronomers noted that during attempts to reacquire 3I Atlas using infrared telescopes, the instruments reported zero thermal emission, as if the object had no temperature at all. This does not fit any model of natural origin. No official source explains why part of the observations is classified. And when journalists contacted NASA, they received only a dry response. The object has exited the observable field. Monitoring concluded. But some people are convinced the monitoring continues, just not publicly. And every time new data quietly disappears from the web, it only fuels more curiosity. Perhaps in a few years, we'll learn there was never any mystery. Or perhaps those hours of radio silence hide something far more interesting. Whether the object truly went silent or was simply silenced is for you to decide. But even now, as 3I Atlas has already vanished beyond the solar system, its silence is louder than any signal. After the disappearance of the signals, a silence fell around 3I Atlas. Not just radio silence, informational silence. It was as if the object simply dropped out of humanity's field of view. But silence is not always peace. Often, it means that someone already knows more than everyone else. Independent astronomers were the first to raise the alarm. They noticed that access to certain telemetry databases, those containing data on the object's velocity, light reflection, and spectral readings, had become restricted. Previously, the information was updated in real time. Now it was either gone or replaced with template files. Fact: several major catalogs, Minor Planet Center and NASA JPL Small Body Database, went into maintenance on the very days when 3I Atlas moved out of the optical range. Interpretation: maybe it was just coincidence. Servers are regularly updated. But it was unusual that 3 different platforms went into maintenance at the same time, and all 3 contained the freshest data on 3I Atlas. Some researchers speculate that this was the beginning of the closure of public tracking. Maybe authorities wanted to avoid speculation. But another, less comfortable version appeared. Part of the spectral data might have indicated that 3I Atlas was not a typical asteroid. Scientists noted that its light reflection properties did not match any known class of rocky or metallic bodies. Its albedo was abnormally low nearly zero, as if the surface absorbed all light. Only artificial materials with nanostructured surfaces, similar to black mirror coatings, show such behavior. Then screenshots appeared on forums, allegedly from internal documents of one observatory, claiming that the spectral curve contains uncharacteristic peaks. These few words sparked countless theories. Some believed it was just calibration error. Others insisted the peaks resembled residual energetic emissions, similar to a plasma source. That same week, on Twitter, now X, a user labeled Exoplanet posted a series of images supposedly showing the object with right-angled edges in its silhouette, almost like structural components. The post gained hundreds of thousands of views, but the account was deleted within a day. Later, several people claimed it was a fake, but the original files vanished. According to indirect reports, several astronomical centers received internal messages requesting them not to comment on the object's activity. One employee, speaking off the record, said a phrase that fueled even more discussion. "The data remains, they just don't call it 3I Atlas anymore." What that meant is unclear. Could the data have been reclassified under another name? It has happened before. In 2019, several suspicious objects were quietly recategorized as comets. And that was enough. The questions disappeared. Some believe the same thing happened here. Instead of explaining the inexplicable, it's easier to rename it. While official sources stayed silent, amateur astronomers began posting videos claiming they were still seeing 3I Atlas, but no longer where it was supposed to be. The coordinates didn't match. Some said it was moving slower. Others claimed its trajectory had suddenly shifted. It could have been observational error. But one of the biggest mysteries was that NASA's orbital projections, which should show the object's predicted path, also changed. Without explanation. According to an astronomer in Chile, in the new predictions, 3I Atlas was supposed to pass several million kilometers farther from Earth than previously calculated. A small difference by cosmic standards, but only possible if the input parameters were altered, or if the object suddenly changed speed. This is where the most intriguing theories began. Some researchers suggested it could have been the result of a material outgassing event, similar to what was proposed for Oumuamua. But based on prior observations, 3I Atlas's shape did not support such a natural explanation. Another version arose. Perhaps an external influence occurred. Someone or something adjusted its motion. An article soon appeared online titled, "When a Trajectory Refuses to Obey Gravity." The author claimed to have received leaked data about anomalous acceleration change on a specific day, but could not prove it. Every link to supporting archives had gone dead. Interestingly, at the same time, December 2024, several U.S. military bases recorded a brief increase in NORAD space monitoring activity. It could be a coincidence. End-of-year system updates are common. But on tracking maps that evening, a tag appeared. Unidentified object outside catalog boundaries. Sources close to the National Space Awareness Center refused to comment, but one symbolic line was reportedly said. Some bodies are better left unclassified. And the longer this silence lasts, the more deliberate it appears. In a world where every satellite records millions of objects, the disappearance of even a tiny detail is never accidental. Did 3I Atlas really just drift into the dark? Or is its path being tracked quietly, deep within closed servers, away from public eyes? No one answers. But astronomers increasingly talk about shadows around the data. Shadows in which truth becomes blurred. Maybe we'll never learn what vanished along with 3I Atlas. Or maybe, one day, those shadows will turn into light they simply haven't allowed us to see yet. Several weeks had passed since 3I Atlas officially disappeared from the databases. The media stopped mentioning it, and official scientific publications limited themselves to short notes, claiming the object had confirmed its interstellar origin and was now simply leaving the solar system. On the surface, the story could have ended there. But suddenly, leaks began to appear. Small, seemingly accidental, yet far too detailed to be accidental. A real fact. In February 2025, on a scientific forum in the Deep Space Observation section, a user named Oberontrack posted a series of screenshots taken from the internal portal of a European observatory. The images showed spectral analysis data, where instead of the usual wavelength lines, there was an almost flat band with clearly visible short pulses repeating every 11 seconds. If genuine, this could indicate a regular energy source, something emitting steadily, not chaotically like natural bodies. Interpretation. Most scientists immediately dismissed it as fake. But several independent experts confirmed that the file format genuinely matched internal observation templates. In other words, the screenshots could have been real, though no one risked confirming it openly. Then things became even stranger. 2 days after the publication, Oberontrack's account was deleted, and all search engine links to his post stopped working, as if the entire trace had been erased. But users managed to save archive copies. When they analyzed them, they found something odd. The metadata showed the files weren't created in Europe at all, but on a server belonging to a NASA laboratory in Pasadena. Some researchers suggested it might have been an internal leak, someone with access to the data acting unofficially. Others claimed it was deliberate disinformation, the kind of leaks created to confuse the public and blend truth with fiction. But the story took another turn. In March 2025, an anonymous employee of a Hawaiian observatory, registered in the community as Kaon42, told journalists from an independent outlet that during the days when 3I Atlas was still being observed, part of their telemetry was being intercepted by an external channel. According to him, the information was being duplicated to an unknown server outside the university system, and when they tried to find out who was behind it, the only response was, restricted by request. The journalists checked the IP addresses, and they indeed pointed to a government domain. Officially, it belonged to a unit responsible for space monitoring and orbital security. But they didn't explain why a near-departed interstellar object required this kind of data interception. Some experts argued that such duplication is normal. Data is stored in multiple locations for backup. But others believe the telemetry might have contained more than simple coordinates. Kaon42 later posted that he had seen an anomalous entry in the observatory logs reading, "External override. Tracking data adjusted." Hours later, his profile was deleted, and the original post vanished from every forum copy. The next development was even stranger. A technician from La Palma, working with the Grantekin telescope, anonymously sent journalists an image taken on the last day 3I Atlas was seen in the visible spectrum. The photo showed a faint light, but next to it was a thin line, like a luminous streak. Researchers who checked the metadata confirmed the image was indeed taken by the telescope. But in the final version published on the observatory's website, that streak was gone. Why? No official explanation was given. They simply stated that the image had been processed for quality. But some believe that quality improvement was just a pretext. Several amateurs who downloaded the original file insist that the line looked less like a glitch and more like the trajectory of another object, possibly even an artificial escort. And then an old message resurfaced from an internal Astronomers chat, leaked by someone to the public. It looks like there were 2 objects in the field of view, but one of them had no optical reflection. Could 3I Atlas have had a companion? Officially, no. There is no confirmation. But indirect reports indicate that several observations from Chile and Canada recorded anomalies in background motion, as if something near the object was casting a shadow. At this point, the story began to resemble not just an astronomical mystery, but an information operation. Some say the government is hiding a scientific breakthrough. Others claim someone is intentionally planting fake stories to create a legend. Yet some details are too precise to dismiss. For instance, a few days after the object disappeared, NASA briefly mentioned in a closed bulletin unexpected fluctuations in magnetic field parameters near the heliopause. The document was quickly deleted, but copies remain among certain researchers. The solar system's magnetic field does not change for no reason, and the timing, coinciding with 3I Atlas's passage, was suspiciously precise. There is speculation that the object didn't just pass by. It might have interacted with the heliosphere, or possibly even scanned it. This sounds far-fetched, but no more far-fetched than many things that once seemed impossible. Some researchers now say that 3I Atlas left behind an informational wake, a data trail that continues to affect observation systems. And most intriguingly, several observatories admitted that after its passage, they began detecting strange signals in a completely different range, infrasound. What this means, no one explains. But those who have seen the data say the wave patterns are far too orderly to be natural. Why did the data disappear from archives? Why are witnesses' accounts deleted within hours? And most importantly, why has the word 3I Atlas nearly vanished from official reports, as if someone wants to erase it from history? Maybe the issue is not the object itself, but what it revealed. And if someone truly is trying to hide the truth, then perhaps we are witnessing not just a cosmic phenomenon, but the first evidence that we are not alone. Whether this is reality or an elaborate illusion, that's for you to decide. But every leak, every missing file, every strange coincidence only strengthens the impression that the story of 3I Atlas is far from over. Several months passed after the last telescopes lost sight of 3I Atlas. For official science, the story was over. For the average person, forgotten. But those who had been following it from the very beginning say, this is not the end. It is only a pause before something that might change humanity's understanding of what a visitor from another world truly means. Fact, according to calculations, 3I Atlas was supposed to exit the boundaries of the solar system in early summer 2025. Yet a few weeks before this, an entry suddenly appeared in the Deep Space Network database under the code UNREG OBJ 992A. A short note followed. Detected transient signal, unknown source, trajectory uncertain. The entry remained there for only 3 hours, then vanished. But several researchers who managed to save copies claimed the signal's coordinates matched the projected path of 3I Atlas. Interpretation: it might have been a simple system error. Or perhaps the object didn't travel farther. Perhaps it simply shut down. Or, as some believe, switched into a mode our sensors cannot detect. There is speculation that movement data from after April 2025 still exists, but not in civilian archives. One analyst who once worked with satellite databases anonymously stated, "You won't find any record of the object under the name 3I Atlas. But look for an internal code beginning with C43. Everything is there, even the change in velocity. What that means, no one has been able to verify. But the mere mention of internal codes triggered a new wave of suspicion. Some independent researchers conducted their own calculations and discovered that at one point the trajectory of 3I Atlas shifted by 0.002 degrees, a tiny difference, yet one that cannot be explained by gravity or solar pressure. Physically, this is only possible in 2 scenarios. Either an internal explosion occurred, or there was a corrective impulse. And here begins what official science refuses to discuss. Rumors spread online that 3I Atlas wasn't a comet fragment at all, but the remnant of something constructed. Not necessarily a ship in the conventional sense, but perhaps an automated probe long past its active phase. This would explain the strange geometry, the low albedo, and the repeating pulses in the spectral data. Some researchers believe that at the moment the signals disappeared, the object entered a resting phase. In other words, standby mode. What it might be waiting for, no one knows. Then came another, even more unsettling clue. In May 2025, documents from the European Space Agency briefly included the line, "Observation lockdown due to correlated deep space anomaly." The line was quickly removed, but someone captured a screenshot. A correlated anomaly is what they usually call an event detected simultaneously by multiple independent systems. What happened? On the same day, China's Purple Mountain Observatory recorded a short flare in the far-infrared spectrum. 14 hours later, astronomers in South America reported an unexplained dimming of background radiation. The numbers were small, but the timing was too precise. And although no official connection to 3I Atlas was acknowledged, private discussion circles referred to this as the trace that shouldn't have remained. There is speculation that the object didn't simply leave the system. It vanished in a way that doesn't fit any known model. Maybe it changed direction. Or perhaps it did something no one expected. It slowed down. One independent analyst who works with astronomical catalogs wrote in his personal blog, "If the data is accurate, then between May 11th and 13th the object reduced its speed by 2%. It's not much, but if it's not an error, then it's stopping." The post gathered hundreds of comments. A day later, it disappeared. The site ceased to exist, and its archived copy was blocked in most search engines. No explanation was given. Meanwhile, whispers in scientific circles speak more and more often about a new object within Neptune's orbit. It has not yet been officially classified, but some of its coordinates suspiciously align with the extended trajectory of 3I Atlas. Officially, it is just an asteroid. But even in the documentation, there is a note. Object requires reevaluation of origin. Perhaps it is an entirely different body, or perhaps the same visitor, merely under a different appearance. Increasingly, astronomers mention that certain regions of the sky are being cleaned of data, supposedly for catalog optimization. Yet these are the very regions where 3I Atlas had been observed. Why these coordinates are now restricted, no one knows. Some believe telescopes are still watching it, just under different identifiers. And perhaps someone continues tracking it, but no longer from Earth. Among certain scientific groups, the idea is spreading that 3I Atlas may have left behind an informational imprint, a structure in space affecting electromagnetic fields. Such imprints could theoretically be created by advanced spacecraft passing through plasma environments. No one has proven this, but several instruments detected faint field oscillations in the region where the object was last seen. Is it coincidence? Or perhaps 3I Atlas was not merely a wanderer, but an observer? Some theorize that such objects may appear cyclically, once every few decades. And if that's true, the next visit could occur in our lifetime. No official agency confirms any of this. No observatory speaks openly. But in the hallways of astronomical conferences, one phrase is being whispered with increasing frequency. It stayed on the line. What that means, no one explains. Perhaps it's just a poetic metaphor. Or perhaps a reminder that sometimes the things we think have disappeared have only slipped into a range we are unable to see. Was 3I Atlas a natural fragment, or a piece of something far more complex? Did it truly fade into the darkness? Or is it simply observing from a place our light cannot reach? There are countless theories, and none of them have been disproven. Maybe the answer is far simpler. Maybe far more complex. And while the official channels remain silent, there is a point in the night sky no one wants to mention aloud. A point that may still be watching back.